Submission Radio here post-fight after the USA versus Spain basketball game. Now, of course, it's UFC 241. I am here with John Morgan, Oscar Willis, and of course, my partner, I'm Kasper Rozalowski. I almost stuffed up the name because it's 2 in the morning, but of course, this is brought to you by Musashi, who help us power through the whole fight week. Shout out to them. Now, guys, it's been a pretty crazy night of fights. John Morgan's got a tan. It was so hot on that octagon. Let's begin talking about the main event, though, because there's just so much to unpack from what happened. We saw Daniel Cormier come out here, question marks whether or not he's going to keep fighting, and he was dominating Stipe until he wasn't. Right. And he ends up losing this match. Stipe is now the champ. DC has question marks all around his future. What did you make of the shift in the fight and the way Stipe, John, was able to win this one?
It's crazy, right? I mean, that's what we talk about with heavyweight MMA. That's what makes classic fights, when you have a little bit going back and forth, right? And it was interesting because, you know, the first fight I remember thinking, okay, Daniel Cormier is a very live underdog in this, you know, but I think I was leaning Stipe at the time, and then Cormier knocks him out in the first round. For the second, you know, fight, I'm thinking, well, listen, there's other ways for DC to win. And I thought he started out doing exactly what I thought it would take to win, especially using the wrestling. He was leaning on that, and then for whatever reason, he just started getting comfortable with his hands, and that's when it became dangerous. That's when it became, you know, I don't want to say a light heavyweight. He's a big dude, you know what I mean? But it's clear that Stipe is the bigger man and has the heavier shots. And for whatever reason, Cormier got comfortable there, and it all turned around in an instant. And think about what that means. I mean, yes, okay, it's one fight. It's a heavyweight title changing hands. But we're sitting here talking about maybe we'll get this John Jones, this third fight, and, you know, what's Cormier got left in the tank? And now, I got to be honest, I'm walking out of this saying, I wouldn't hate it if DC retired right now. He's got nothing else to prove, and he's got the ESPN gig. I'm cool if he's done.
It is fascinating the way you spoke about DC sort of getting comfortable, because he did say on Media Day that, you know, in the first fight, he was kind of worried about Stipe's power in that right hand, and he took it, and he was kind of like, it's not so bad. And in this fight, you know, it was in some ways kind of the undoing. As far as what's next, when you look at Stipe, and before we even get to that...
And look at Oscar Willis. I mean, he looks comfortable right there. What's going on? Are you doing a post-fight show? You're trying to find out what Kasper's doing later on tonight.
Are these more Tinder predictions with Masvidal? Is this a subtle art?
Sorry, guys. I'll spruce up.
Subtle art of seduction right here, happening right before our very eyes. What do you think this win sort of says and does for Stipe Miocic? Because he's a guy who the UFC kind of almost reluctantly promoted, and I get the sense that, you know, with that Francis Ngannou fight, the way that promoted it, they had other guys that they wanted to be champion, and he needed this win more than anything. DC's set up. Dual champions, you know, he's got a commentary gig. Stipe really needed this fight. What do you think this does for him, especially when it comes to sort of the talks of the greatest heavyweights of all time?
Well, it's interesting, right? Because Stipe, I mean, he already had all the credentials in the world. And, you know, now he's got this in the back pocket, this win. And he was saying after that first fight that it was a fluke. Now, I don't think tonight proved that it was a fluke. I think DC could have won. But for Miocic going forward, he's proven that he can beat DC. And so if he had lost tonight, he would have gone from being the greatest heavyweight of all time to being just an amazing heavyweight who won the most title defenses. Now, I think the most interesting question is, what do the UFC do with him? Because they could quite easily book him in that Francis rematch. I think people would watch it. I think Francis could have, you know, possibly improved since then. But for me, I wouldn't be surprised if they went to John Jones and said, listen, there's no clear-cut people at 205 right now. You've danced around heavyweight for about 5 years. You didn't want to fight Cormier up here, but hey, I really think it wouldn't surprise me if they started going in that direction quite soon.
Just quickly, while we're on the topic, I just want to quickly ask both of you guys what you'd like to see next for DC. I suppose the options could be Stipe, Jones, retirement. You mentioned retirement before. Let's say that's off the table. What would you prefer to see next for DC if he keeps fighting?
If he's going to keep fighting, I'd like to see him push for the trilogy with Stipe, not with John Jones. I think it's still a winnable fight for him. I think he made some tactical errors tonight that he can correct. I think he addressed them at the post-fight press conference. I think he can fix those. I got to say, I don't think he beats John Jones. And I don't mean to be disrespectful when I say that. I don't pick anybody against John Jones right now. So I would hate for the last fight of Daniel Cormier's career to be a fight with John Jones, that especially if he loses. Now, for some reason, he could write the storybook ending. If you could say, John, I'll tell you this, if you say John, DC will win. All right, then let's do the John Jones fight all day and let DC, you know, ride off into the sunset. But I just don't see it happening. And I especially hate the fact that they're insisting on doing it at 205 if they ever did do it. So I think I'd lean towards retirement. The guy has proven everything, and he's got this great gig lined up with ESPN. But if you're saying that's off the table, I think
It's
I'd
off the
want him to go-
table.
I think I'd like him to go Stipe over John Jones.
Just quickly, I just want to point out that Casper, we'll be doing a few post shows, and you brought up the fact that the John Jones thing could be crazy for the legacy,
Yeah.
right? It's a big, and I brought up the fact, like you, John. It depends what kind of gambling man you are. A Stipe rematch, there's less chance the DC loses. There's more chance that he can win and walk out on that victory. There's maybe less money in it, but if he wins that, he probably makes more money than if he loses a John Jones fight, and also hurts his legacy even more. So it just depends how much you want to wager on that next fight and the impact that it's going to have in his career.
And how much do you want to wager that after John Jones beats you for a third time, he'll never mention it again? He'll just be respectful for the rest of his life. He'll let you live in peace. He'll never put anything on social media. It'll just go away and nobody will ever talk about it.
He already proved that's not the case tonight. John was very
complimentary of Stipe, though. I believe he probably thinks he could beat the man. He's
very
building
much.
him up.
But he filmed Daniel's post-fight interview with Rogan and put that on his Instagram with no comment. And then he said, I guess, because Cormier had mentioned the fact that he was getting paid so much up front now that he didn't need to fight John Jones. And John tweeted out something like, well, I guess losing doesn't matter so much when you're being paid so much up front. So, I think John will never rise above being catty.
Just quickly, what do you want to see next for DC fight-wise?
I'm not allowed to say retirement.
Okay, say retirement?
I think
Now fight-wise, what do you want to see?
Jared Cannonier. No.
I don't know. Is there Adesanya was joining us on a post-fight
At this rate, that's the fight that's going to happen now.
No, I think if he's going to fight again, the only fight that really makes sense is the trilogy.
But which one, Stipe or John Jones?
Stipe. I think this loss tonight will actually make people less inclined to want to see that third fight with John Jones. I think, like you said, there was this idea that maybe DC could get him. I think everyone's always said DC's going to look old at some point, and I don't necessarily think he looked old. He was obviously still very much winning the fight. But to me, he just looked like he was lacking the thing that made him very elite. He just sort of looked a step off his game tonight. Maybe he was having an off night, but I don't see him beating John Jones. And I'd rather let's do the heavyweight classic trilogy. Roll the dice there. But yeah, if it's Stipe or retirement.
I wonder if part of that was complacency instead of being happy with all that he's accomplished. And I wonder if the John Jones trilogy fight could bring out that old, motivated Cormier. I mean, if legacy is what motivates you, John Jones is your white whale. You've already beaten Stipe. You've proved that you can. You haven't beaten John Jones. And if it's money that you're after, and I feel like that's a big motivator for Cormier, well, the money is in the John Jones fight. That's going to be the higher draw. But that's my take for what it's worth.
It's an interesting point. I mean, I think you're right about it, but it's like you almost have to go to a deep and dark place. Do you really need to go there at this point in your career when you do have money in the bank, when you do have options on the table? You know what I mean? Like, can you really go there? Do you want to go there? I don't think so.
I like this retirement option. I'm just going to put that out there.
Especially
Said it's off the table.
Especially.
All right, DC, you got to fight.
If you have to go down to 205 as well, I mean, you're going to get 4 weeks into that camp and think, oh my God, why am I doing this? And then you'd go through that, and he mentioned on earlier this week that his wife doesn't like what it does to him fighting John Jones. His family goes through struggle. You can see by the amount of times he's bringing his son around this week that he's obviously trying to introduce his son to his stuff. I just don't. I
think no matter what it does to his legacy, and no matter how much he makes financially, I think it takes away more from him physically and mentally. 100%. If he loses that fight, then he would be able to make up in legacy or money if he wanted. I think the guy has done amazing things. Just quickly, just want to also point out, it's not like Stipe luckily won the fight. The guy has amazing heart and showed something that we haven't seen in most Daniel Cormier fights. When the guy starts picking you up and just holding you up there and just thinking, did I leave the oven on at home? And they go, okay, now I got to slam this guy. Most people sort of cave in, give their back, and finish the night off with a rear naked choke. Stipe, after every round, was like, I'll try something else. I'll try something else. And then he did this body thing, but he showed incredible heart, which sort of sets him apart and I think makes him the great champion that he is. All right, let's talk about, obviously, the Nate Diaz, the huge Nate Diaz resurgence that we saw today. Before this, me and Casper thought Anthony Pettis was going to go out there, he was going to use his leg kicks, keep the distance, and dominate this fight. We saw the open workout. John was doing other things, commentating, doing big things around town, but he would have seen it as well. John, tell me, what did you think of the way that Anthony Pettis ended up handling Nate Diaz tonight? Do you think the situation was too much for him? What do you think happened where he sort of couldn't really get into that game plan?
To me, I just think it's credit to Nate Diaz, man. I don't think Anthony Pettis was caught up in the moment. I really don't. I don't think it was an overly emotional affair, which I think we've seen him do it sometimes. I just think it's credit to Nate Diaz. To me, it's more of how good did Nate look after 3 years away and coming back and maybe taking a little bit to get going, but really indeed having that heart of a warrior. You know, those skills that you can go back on at all times, that's never afraid to back down. To be honest, I was picking Showtime in this fight, man. I was picking Anthony Pettis, and I thought there was going to be rust. I thought there were going to be timing issues, and I especially thought in just a 3-round fight, you know, Nate Diaz might not have time to go and dig deep and to get that timing back. You know, what if he accidentally gave away 1 or say 2 rounds? And now, you know, I thought that's what was going to happen. If it had been a 5-round affair, I think I would have picked Nate from the start, but I thought Anthony was going to do it. Instead, man, Nate came back like he didn't skip a beat. You know, maybe had to make some a little bit of adjustments here and there. You know, Anthony had some decent moments, but Nate just showed why he is as popular as he is, you know, and why he is the guy that he is. And, you know, I mean, no need to hide. I'm sure everybody's seen the numbers. I mean, that was what UFC 241 was all about. Everybody was talking and interested in Nate Diaz.
Yeah, I remember watching that fight and thinking Nate is just so goddamn good at drowning people and outlasting people, and it's kind of a risky tactic because some of the early rounds, like round 1, start of round 2, he was taking some big shots, but for him to sort of turn it up quickly and use that urgency, he was speaking in the open workouts that he was looking at himself and thinking, if I fought me, what would I do? I found that fascinating. I never knew that the Diaz brothers had that level of, you know, strategicness. At least it didn't come off that way. So I think it was a very impressive performance from Nate. As far as what you would like to see next, I think it's kind of an obvious answer, right? He called out Masvidal. Masvidal said to both of us that he wants that, or he would be interested in that fight, any fight that makes a lot of money. Do you think there's any chance that fight doesn't happen, or do you think this is kind of a lock? Even Dana's excited about this fight.
Listen, I think they, judging by what John said about the numbers this week, they will do what it takes to get Nate back in that cage, and rightfully so. And I think the Cheshire Cat grin that Jorge Masvidal showed at ringside when Nate pointed at him. Listen, if Nate Diaz at this point says, I want to fight that guy, I think everyone's like, well, I guess that's who he's fighting. You know, and then his whole shtick about being, well, I'm the title holder of the baddest motherfucker around, and I want to defend it against him. Don't we all love it? I think Jorge's that kind of guy. Nate's that kind of guy. You know, who cares if they're going to be pretty cordial to each other? Because when they get in there, stylistically, that's an amazing fight. They're going to scrap it out. And we're in this era of MMA now where we get characters and people are doing, you know, essentially comedy bits and stuff like that. And that's fine. But that means when you just occasionally get 2 dudes who are like, that guy's good at fighting, that guy's good at fighting, they like to fight, it actually makes it more special. You just want to sit like, as Jorge said in an interview with me this week, it's 2 Latin dogs going at it. I'm down.
And they're both genuinely interesting characters. They're not putting on an act. There's just something that sort of draws to people, to Nate Diaz and to Jorge Masvidal. You mentioned the numbers that Nate's pulling. Jorge's doing insane numbers. The biggest video on Submission Radio by far this week. 300 billion, I don't know, who's counting.
That's as many people as watch one championship.
The entire world is watching many times over. But I was just going to say also, it helps out the welterweight division, right? Because you got Colby going for that title. Masvidal wants that title. He's probably not going to get it. Leon Edwards wants Masvidal. He's probably not going to get it. Yeah. So you get a really juicy fight. And Dennis, you said this on a previous show that we did just before, that it's probably the biggest sort of fight in the welterweight division that you can sort of make. And it's crazy because it would arguably be bigger than the title fight for the welterweight belt.
I think Masvidal versus Diaz is probably the biggest fight the UFC can put on right now that doesn't have Conor in it.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm wondering, and John, maybe you can answer this for me. We've had some epic fights. Nate Diaz versus Conor McGregor. We've had, you know, Brock Lesnar coming out of the woodworks, hanging around for a little bit. How big do you think this Masvidal-Diaz fight could get?
It's going to be huge. And I'll say it's going to be because I think it's going to get made. I think it's going to be a huge, huge, huge fight, and that's why they have to do it right now. And you got to strike while the iron's hot. You know, the Conor McGregor name gets mentioned with Nate Diaz, of course, but you could do that trilogy at any point in time. And I don't mean to disrespect Masvidal and say that you can't do it at any point in time, but I mean, we've been watching Masvidal for, 15, 16 years now. This is the moment. This is the exact moment. I don't think you can go, well, it'll probably be around in 12 months. It'll probably be around 18 months. No. As you said, these guys are both getting huge views, huge numbers. The UFC wants to cash in for sure. And like you said, it's just a great fight. Stylistically, it's fun. It's not going to be comedy bits. It's not going to be, fake trash talk. It's just going to be a phenomenal fight. I think it's going to be huge.
Sorry, I just want to quickly on it. Do you think the UFC opens their checkbook for Jorge Masvidal and pays him what he believes he deserves what he does deserve.
Yeah, absolutely. They're going to make it back. No question about it. They're going to make it back. The numbers are going to be huge for this.
For some reason, I just picture Dana White opening up like one of those pocket books with like the little old school checks, and it's just like little UFC check, and he's like, all right, how much is this going to cost me? Like, puts his glasses on and tries to figure it out.
These are just the ones that appeal to everybody. I mean, these two guys, right? I mean, these are just old school fighters. They appeal to everybody. It's not hard to sell. Like, well, here's the thing about Colby Covington. That you'll really like him because he's a good guy. It's kind of an act, but it's fun, and he's got great cardio. No. Two badasses. You just look at them. Their highlight reel shows it. The world's going to buy it.
Actually, but just on Covington, I think it was a mistake for him to show up here tonight. I mean, here's the thing.
He's not well liked in California.
Well, of course, and I think the booze do help him. But here's the thing: he was just completely overlooked tonight. It was all about Masvidal. Masvidal was sitting there. Nate didn't say anything to him. Maybe he was hoping to get something going. You know what I mean? Like, it was kind of like
Nate buried him at the post-fight presser. I don't know who that is.
He was kind of buried today. Like, he wasn't important anymore. Like, everything was focused on Masvidal. Everything was focused on Nate. And then in the press conference, like he said, it's like, Nate, it's like, who's that? Is he in the welterweight division? And if he would have stayed away, then that's one thing. It's not the same thing when you see the guy just kind of sitting there with like a belt on his shoulder and everybody's looking at the guy next to him going, hey, we can't wait to see this guy fight.
I tell you what, if Colby wins the title and then fights the winner of Nate versus Jorge Masvidal, that might be the most one-sided fan favorite in UFC history, because the guy was being like, I mean, I've never heard boos, and it says his act is working, but yeah, Jorge and Nate against Colby, like, the arena would be electric.
I do respect sort of Covington for coming here and trying at least. Sometimes these things just don't work out, and it just so happens that there were bigger things happening on the night. Also, in retrospect, how crazy is it that we're talking about all of this? And it makes you realize just how much was on the line for Nate Diaz. Coming back, sort of people saying he's holding out for the Conor fight. That was his power, that was his leverage. And if he lost that tonight, all of this would have gone away.
Instead, he sees it, and he's got it. He's got the power now.
He's gotten so much bigger than he was before.
He's got the leverage, as was mentioned at the press conference.
It's unbelievable.
Unreal.
Man, I'll tell you what, he's got all the credentials in the world to have a big fight. Now, let's quickly talk about the middleweight fight on the card, because I don't know about you, Cass, but watching that one live, it was kind of one of the highlights of live fights that I've seen in quite some time. There was just something about that fight. You didn't know what to expect. It was just so organic, and the fact we haven't seen these guys together before. You have this guy in Yoel who's an absolute beast. You have this guy in Apollo who we didn't really know what to expect. And I'll admit, I underestimated him. I thought Yoel was going to go out there, and I thought Yoel was going to win it. And whatever, do whatever Yoel does. But we don't quite know what happens. He says he's friends with John Jones because he stayed at his house once, so he's not going up to light heavyweight. So, Anyway, let's talk about the fact that Paulo Costa went out there and not only impressed, but was able to deal with the mental games of a guy like Yoel Romero. John Morgan, you've been in this game for quite some time. What's your impression of Paulo Costa after that performance?
Well, listen, I was high on the guy from the first time I saw him. I happened to see his debut fight in Brazil. He was first fight of the night. Gareth McClellan, I believe, was the opponent. And I remember just seeing the way the guy moved and the size he was, going, oh my God, this dude is going to be a problem. But yes, this was the test. This was the moment where we say, okay, we see the flash, we understand what he's capable of, but against a guy like Romero, is he going to stand the test? And I actually picked Paulo going into this fight. I thought he would. I feel like he's kind of the younger version. He's ready to take that next step, and he proved it. But he was pushed to the test here. He really was pushed to the limit. Yoel, man, the mind games he plays, the way he does things in there, he try to, and just the way he moves and the way he attacks, it's crazy. But listen, I think Paulo Costa showed tonight that he is legit. He's the real deal. And I think, obviously you guys are salivating at Whitaker not assigning, just like we all are. But I'm already salivating for Costa against the winner of that fight too, whoever it is out of that. So, man, how good does that middleweight division look right now? Because you've got two really good title fights lined up.
Do you think Whitaker's like, got another one?
Absolutely. There's no doubt about it.
I just beat the other one twice.
There's no doubt about it, because me and Casper were talking about this before. If Whitaker wins against Adesanya, who's an incredible challenge for him, and this is a fight that you could break down 100 times, and not quite. I'll be honest. Right now, I'm sort of leaning towards Whitaker. When I start watching tape and start figuring this thing out, there's absolutely a chance Israel could do it. Then after you beat a guy like Israel, and by the way, you just fought Yoel Romero a couple of times. And by the way, before that, you were fighting Jacare and all these guys, back when these guys were absolute killers. No big deal. You've got this guy called Paulo Costa waiting for you, and he's just ready to go, and he's the size of a heavyweight. How does he even make middleweight, So absolutely, he's sitting around wondering, Why am I in this middleweight division?
and
Not the one 10 years ago.
And he's a beast who just keeps coming. You know, I would never want to take, or no one in the division would want to take any of Romero's shots, not even on his worst day, my man. I mean, at the end of the day, like, if you're Paulo Costa, I feel like we're kind of witnessing the birth of a potential Brazilian superstar. He's got the look, he's got the face for it. He's got great rig, beautiful man. He's got the connection to Arnold Schwarzenegger. I feel like that's kind of a helping moment.
Trying on the English, he's doing his best. It's getting better. You know, it's better than my Portuguese.
I couldn't believe the shots that he was able to.
Casper doesn't rate your Portuguese very highly, John Morgan. And neither do I. Response.
Try.
What do you think of Paulo's decision though? Because he said, you know, in media day that he wants to fly over to Melbourne and watch this Robert Whittaker Israel Adesanya fight. Plot twist: when asked if he would be the backup fighter, he shut it down immediately and said absolutely no. I think it's something that Robert Whittaker and Israel would probably like. Robert Whittaker's been very open about the fact that, you know, champs shouldn't get last-minute replacements, not when they've been training for one particular guy. It's just disrespectful. What do you think about sort of, you know, his decision to say that?
Well, actually, it's an interesting decision because a lot of guys, like Volkanovski, for example, he flew all that way to be the backup for Edgar Holloway recently. And a lot of guys, I can see they're like, this is an opportunity, I need to take it. But I also respected it's almost his self-evaluation. He's like, no, like, I'm worth being booked, being promoted, and the training camps are too hard for me to just be a backup. I respected that because for a young guy, you know, he's had 13 odd fights or something.
And he's been away for a while. You got to think the money would be good.
He's been away. He's not a superstar yet. It's actually quite brave to be like, no, like, guys, trust me, I'm worth booking. So I respected that decision.
You did see Waleed, his manager next to him, though, go, well, wait a minute. How much time are we talking about? You know what I mean? It was like, well, hold on. Yeah. He says no, but we mean like last minute. Yeah. We're like, yeah.
And they probably will need to have a backup for that fight in the UFC.
Dana did say they have something in place. He wouldn't mention any names. So I guess we'll see on Fight Week who seems to be strolling around. Maybe Anderson will be down there. Or actually, do you know what? It probably will be Canada.
Stephen Bonner.
Yes, it will be Canada. But yeah, I actually thought Costa came across really well today. You know, I thought he looked great, and I love the idea of him going down there to be there to see the winner. And while I think him versus Whittaker is a fantastic fight, there's a bit of spice to him and Adesanya. Yeah. I kind of enjoy it. I like the fact that he keeps saying this skinny guy as with such derision, you know, as if any of us could hope to be as big as Costa one day. But yeah, I love the way he sort of talks about him like that, and Izzy will talk back, and I think there's a little bit of spice to that one.
You know, it's good just being there in Melbourne. Like the questions being asked of Whittaker and Adesanya will be around Paulo Costa already. So with him, just his presence, he's already been promoted for his next fight, basically.
And it's crazy. We're talking about all these divisions, and they're just going off right now. You got welterweight going off. You got middleweight going off with all these young guys in the division. All these crazy things happening. All these new matchups that we have. You know, all these guys are moving up, down. It's all happening, John Morgan. But just quickly, what would you rather see? You know, Oscar brings up the Israel Adesanya Paulo Costa fight. Is that the fight that you think would be absolute fireworks, or do you think the Robert Whittaker legacy? I mean, if this
that's the argument right there, right? You're right. Just stylistically, thinking of the two of them there, of Costa and Adesanya, you're like, oh, just that would be phenomenal. But like Whittaker has so much respect about him now, man. That dude has proven himself over and over and over, and yeah, doing something with that would be pretty incredible. To give Whittaker the chance to beat another absolute killer like that would be amazing. And then for Costa, you know, it's one of those things. If Adesanya wins and then you take it right off of him, you know, maybe he got lucky. I mean, that wouldn't be the case, but that's the argument in retrospect, right? That's how you rewrite history. Whereas if you take it off Whittaker, who has had this incredible run, I think it probably means a little something more.
Well, I'll tell you what, we better get out of here because we're going to replace you guys with Jason Tatum and Kevin Durant because the USA basketball team is coming through here. I wish Jason Statham would come through here, but he won't return our phone calls after the last incident.
The Rock of MMA.
Yeah, of course, yeah. This is the end of the Rock and Roller post-show preview show. It's all happening. It's 2 a.m. here at the Honda Center. By the way, I didn't see one Honda all night. I want to thank John Morgan, Oscar Willis, of course. I'm Dennis Crowder. There's Kasper Rozalowski. Check out Musashi, and we'll see you guys next time.